So this new video came out. Most of this video by Timbah does this new video is extremely great. I would say there are things that come up throughout that I'm like, okay. But that happens with video essays, like points where it's like, there are times where it's like so he's basically talking about this guy, Russell Brand, who just, misrepresents things and provides, I would say, a short-sighted conspiratorial view when, even though conspiracies are often very real, you have to talk about them in ways that help us get further towards the truth, not further away from the truth. And I find that Russell Brand is not so great at that. I think his critical thinking and his presentation, which I hadn't watched much of his clips until watching this video, it's always so over the top that I watch him and I'm like, oh, he's an actor. I mean, and that's all good. Like, but he is acting and he's more engaging and entertaining than most people, than the average person. But what he's saying, if you really stop and think about it, has tons of holes in it. So Timbah did a great job of pointing out those holes and like really picked them apart and showed points where Russell Brand was clearly misrepresenting things in ways that seem like they'd have to be intentional. Information about studies, like the sources he uses, like just like the perspectives he's referencing. There's a lot of misrepresentation going on, and Timbah did a great job of drawing it out. Some comments were critical about like it in the sense that it seemed like he was almost nitpicking, which I understand, and I've been guilty of myself. It's hard to sometimes it's easy to fall into that sort of pattern of like looking at stuff that's too detailed and maybe you need to set it up right. It is true that Timbah probably could have done a little bit more of like an expansive survey before getting into some of the details. We do just jump right into like a very specific detail. There's also issue that comes up throughout a little bit where like he'll talk about Brand's sort of like twisting of the truth related to a subject like international relations, Ukraine, like the US, NATO, like, or like, stuff related to pharmaceutical companies. And Timbah doesn't always seem to be criticizing the stuff like the pharmaceutical companies or like the US's approach to armed conflict. He just focuses on criticizing Brand's perspective and doesn't do what I think is necessary, which is to explain how there's a better approach to those legitimate problems that Brand points out. You know what I mean? You can't just be like, he's misrepresenting this information related to pharmaceutical stuff without saying, oh, but like it's understandable to criticize the pharmaceutical companies for X, Y, and Z reasons. So there's a few things that come up throughout where you're like, okay, I don't know I don't know what was going on there. We could have taken a second to just, address that as we're moving through, because otherwise it seems almost disingenuous, or it seems like a little bit patronizing in a way, because like Russell Brand's listeners they're not unable to reason. They can think through. So if you have to provide an argument, though, you don't want to just leave it up in the air and make it seem like you don't understand why people would be drawn into those perspectives, or why they basically that's the best way to put it. So those are some of the smaller problems that come up throughout. But if you look at the comments, you'll see a lot of people noticed what I did, which is there's this weird twist at the end. So a lot of people saying he's not an anarchist, which is understandable because, of course, Russell Brand doesn't like adhere to Anyway, so it all comes up. So Russell Brand paints himself as an anarchist, and he says he believes in anarchism, and he's not completely ignorant of what anarchism is. He describes it in maybe a somewhat in a simplified way, but while he is not an anarchist, he is presenting as some simulacra of an anarchist. He is trying to present himself as one, disingenuous, and anyone who understands anarchism can see the vast inconsistencies in it, Timbah included. Timbah really addresses that he's not really an anarchist and that it's a veneer. But then, and I went through so many of the comments, and they're so interesting. They're like Goodreads reviews. They're so interesting. This whole video, he does it on purpose. He's gullible. It's poorly sourced information. And then to promote anarchism, in quotes. So that's perfect. And then a deeply foolish ideology. And it's like Timbah forgets the point he made. That Brand is not an anarchist. And says some pretty wild stuff. It's like a wild turn in the video. It really is shocking when you're listening. I was just listening and I was like, wait, what the heck? The whole video made a lot of sense. And then you get to this part and it's really bizarre, actually.
Knowledge of the economy, geopolitics, and every other issue he talks about on his channel. While we're being honest about Russell's politics, we should just leave this as implied. Even if Russell was honest in his application of the anarchist beliefs he claims to have, the anarchist beliefs in and of themselves are stupid. They ask us to believe that the world is full of compassionate, rational, and unified people who suddenly, when placed in a centralized government, become cruel, irrational segregationists, as if Adolf...
No. Just no. I mean, you don't have to be an anarchist to know that that's totally not even true. It's not like that's close to the truth. That's an absolutely absurd thing to say. You definitely do not have to believe that people are inherently good to be an anarchist. The idea is obviously that people can be good or bad, and we should do our best to structure our societies to emphasize the good. So it's just like, it's not even like remotely true. It's like bizarre. And then he has an example of Hitler. Do we think Hitler was so different? A few people commented on Timbah's tone, and it's true. He gets very escalated. Like, listen to this.
When placed in a centralized government, become cruel, irrational segregationists, as if Adolf in the beer halls was a fundamentally different person to Adolf in the Reichstag. His brain apparently changing as he stepped through the doors of power.
Is that what you think anarchists think? Really? What are you talking about, dude?
Suddenly becoming an evil member of the
I'm sorry.
Centralized power structure, rather than the saint-like proletarian voice of compassion and unity he had been before.
Sorry, what? This is an argument about anarchism?
I don't think that the working class, or the middle class for that matter, have a natural tendency towards rationality or compassion.
Wait, hold on.
Proletarian voice of compassion and unity he had been before. I don't think that the working class, or the middle class for that matter, have a natural tendency towards rationality or compassion.
Okay, just to be clear, the middle class is also the working class. that didn't click until watching this now. I mean, very, very often there's like a disappearing middle class. So there's not much middle class in a lot of senses. You know, how many Americans are like one missed paycheck away from like not being able to pay their rent? You know what I mean? So often what we'd think of as the middle class are working for a wage and unable to have any ownership or control over the means of production. That's not always true. There's plenty of people who are petit bourgeois, maybe like, you know, in a sense I am. Like, I work for a wage, but I have a small business. I'm a sole owner. Like, I'm the only employee at my small business of being a therapist. So I'm sort of a business owner, but I also work for a wage that I don't really have much control over. It's determined by the insurance companies. So it's like, in a sense, you know, it's determined in a complicated way. But anyways, that's not the point. The idea that's not the point. The idea that anarchists believe that everyone's always rational, and he doesn't.
Class, or the middle class for that matter, have a natural tendency towards rationality or compassion.
So he doesn't think people have a natural tendency towards rationality or compassion. Okay, well, that's a little bit of that's actually, I kind of do think people actually have a tendency towards those things. They also have tendencies away from those things. But we do have tendencies towards those things too. They're just not our only tendencies. But this is like a bizarre, surely he's going to cite an anarchist writer, right? Surely he's going to cite an anarchist thinker, right?
And nor do I think there is a natural bond of fraternity tying us all together. I think...
Well, then maybe you should refer to an anarchist thinker who thinks that
everyone has a choice whether they want to be reasonable and compassionate towards others. And many...
Hold on, what?
Passion. And nor do I think there is a natural bond of fraternity tying us all together. I think that everyone has a choice whether they want to be reasonable and compassionate towards others.
That is bizarre. You also think everyone has a choice about whether they want to be rational or compassionate? that is a literal irony and paradox because you're saying that they're rational if they have a choice. And also, that's weird. People aren't that rational. It's like he's simultaneously saying that anarchists are wrong for believing people are always rational and saying that he believes people are always rational in a way that, to me, makes no sense. Of course, people don't always choose whether they want to be compassionate or rational. We are controlled by a lot of different tendencies. But also, when is he going to cite an anarchist thinker? Well, because he made the point that Russell Brand is obviously not an anarchist and is just using it as sort of a veneer. One comment puts it really well. Anarchism is this distant thing that Brand can refer to sort of balance out all the very presently reactionary perspectives that he's putting forward. So is there anything else I wanted to say about this? It was really bizarre. And I don't know this person. They can, they have different political beliefs than me, Timbah. That's fine. They're clearly good at making video essays. They got a lot of critical comments on this video. I don't know if they responded. I hope they take it well. A lot of the critical comments were very, very thoughtful and kind. And I'm not joking. Most of them ended with people saying, I'm still going to watch your videos. Some people said they were unsubscribing. The vast majority of critical comments said, I still love you, man, and I'm going to love your videos. So I hope you take a note. He does not, as far as I'm aware, he does not cite an anarchist thinker once.
And many, naturally, choose not to be those things. If Russell's theories about humanity's innate compassion are true, why is it that on social media platforms where we are most free to be our natural selves, the worst of all human behaviors and instincts always seem to rise to the top? Why is it that whenever a
obviously, it would have something to do with social media apps being businesses that run on reactions and get more ad revenue the more reactions they get. So they actually, as structures, perpetuate the way that people are represented within those structures. So these apps can obviously try to promote the more attention-getting things, which are the most aggravating. So the idea that Timbah has done some sort of study on social media expression or read research about it and thinks it's some reason to view our more genuine selves, I don't know why he would think that. It's actually kind of idealist, to go back to the idealism thing. It's like he's saying that the material evidence comes from our ideas and who we are mentally and psychologically, rather than the material evidence coming from material things, which is how those structures actually function to promote those apparent representations of mental psychological functioning. So the idea that social media evidence is evidence that people are unable to live in anarchist societies when there's been no description of any anarchist thinking is extremely bizarre.
Manages to break free of central members than anything the state could ever dream of, coming together in a compassionate, unified front. Gangs feels like humans are tethering us all locality and naivety of each of the uncentralized systems are as small.
Like, Timbah, I thought you understood that Brand wasn't an anarchist, man. Like, it's not even like a big. It's not. A few people in the comments supporting Timbah were like, oh, it's the no true Scotsman fallacy for anarchists. No true anarchist. No, it's not. No, it's not. Just because you say one person is not part of this category does not mean you are doing the no true Scotsman fallacy. That's a fallacy when you're doing it a lot with a bunch of different things. There are actual anarchists. Why did Timbah not read David Graeber, or go back to, Bakunin or something? It's just very bizarre that he would not cite any anarchists. I think he mentions Chomsky at one point in this video. I don't know if Chomsky's an anarchist, but he doesn't mention it in this section. He's not rebutting anyone's actual. I don't think it's even mentioned in reference to anarchism, if I'm not mistaken. But it's like, Timbah, dude, what? You worked so hard on the rest of that video, man. You made 90 minutes of well-researched content. You couldn't read two articles about anarchism, man? And you know that he's not an anarchist. Why are you doing this?
Small as possible. It's small. So vote.
Did you have to get the video out quick for the ground news sponsorship or something? What's the deal with that, man? So anyways, sometimes it's better to not upload. And that's sort of the takeaway there. This is a podcast or something like that.